The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the true mind of the Tathagata. Today is the third day, day 3 of this 7-day sesshin in January 2021, the first sesshin of the new year. And I would like to share with you an email that came to me this morning from a student, and it is very much worth pondering. Dear Roshi, I hope your sesshin is going well. I've been thinking over the past few days about the capital insurrection, like many people, and also distressed about how many people on Facebook are extreme on either side. It was clearly a terrible thing to do, but there have been so many people writing off other people as evil or in a cult or whatever. And I feel like if you think that, you're really not going to bridge any gaps. This is one thing I learned from Buddhism and living in Oklahoma, is how to think about people as people and not primarily about their political or social views, which I would most likely disagree with. Anyway, I was doing yoga this afternoon and musing over this in the back of my brain, and all of a sudden I thought, but nothing is outside. Not other people, not other beings. Nothing is outside God. And I realized that one of the things that's been bothering me about all of this is the constant otherizing. If we don't agree with somebody, they're automatically all wrong, all other. Looking for the things that we have in common is one thing, but understanding that we are all the same, that even the worst person is not outside God or Buddha. It was a really clarifying moment. We're all Buddha nature, all of us, together. The things that divide us are illusory, whether they are opinions or classifications of beings. No separation between beings or time. When I sit, it is literally true that the ancient masters are sitting with me. True that the Buddha has practiced in every spot on earth in some lifetime. Maybe not true in a literal sense, but true in a way that is deeper than truth or not truth. Anyway, I could keep rambling on, but really, it really felt like I had come home in some weird sense, that I know who I am, and that I can't fall out of creation from poor judgment or poor actions. Not sure if that makes any sense. Gasho. It may not make sense in the way some people look at it, but it is a deep insight that she's had. Let me read it again. It's definitely worth absorbing. And then I'll add some comments. I've been thinking over the past few days about the capital insurrection, like many people, and also distressed about how many people on Facebook are extreme on either side. It was clearly a terrible thing to do, but there have been so many people writing off other people as evil or in a cult or whatever. And I feel like if you think that, you're really not going to bridge any gaps. This is one thing I learned from Buddhism and living in Oklahoma, is how to think about people as people and not primarily about their political or social views, which I would most likely disagree with. Anyway, I was doing yoga this afternoon and musing over this in the back of my brain, and all of a sudden I thought, but nothing is outside. Not other people, not other beings. Nothing is outside God. And I realized that one of the things that has been bothering me about all of this is the constant otherizing. If we don't agree with somebody, they're automatically all wrong, all other. Looking for the things that we have in common is one thing, but understanding that we are all the same, that even the worst person is not outside God or Buddha nature. It was a really clarifying moment. We are all Buddha nature, all of us together. The things that divide us are illusory, whether they are opinions or classifications of beings. No separation between beings or time. When I sit, it is literally true that the ancient masters are sitting with me. True that the Buddha has practiced in every spot on earth in some lifetime. Maybe not true in a literal sense, but true in a way that is deeper than truth or not truth. Anyway, I could keep rambling on, but I really felt like I'd come home in a weird sense, that I know who I am and that I can't fall out of creation from poor judgment or poor actions. And she is quite right on. Let's take a look at the first precept, not to kill, but to cherish all life. Most people think not killing means you don't put a knife in somebody's back, shoot them, or kill an animal to eat. But there's far deeper meaning of not killing. And she's labeled it here in a certain way, although she's seeing a very deep expression of it. If we kill somebody by assuming that they're a certain way, oh, this person is always like this with me. Oh, that person is always doing thus and so. We rob them of the potential for change, for transformation, for expressing their innate beingness. Hakuin had a number of Kensho experiences. And as some of you probably heard, when he was pretty young and just not quite beginning his training, but in his first decade of training, he heard the story of Ganto. Ganto was a Chinese master who had come to awakening relatively early in life and was teaching. And bandits overran his temple and they skewered him. They killed him. They ran him through with a sword. And as he died, he screamed so loud that it was supposedly heard for 3 miles. That was quite a bellow. He was certainly one with his dying. And Hakuin was so upset by this because if you remember, Hakuin became a monk because he had a terror of falling into hell, because he felt like he'd behaved in some ways that maybe might have brought him hell as he died. And so he had come to the conclusion that if he became a monk, he would evade hell, he would avoid it. And suddenly to find that somebody as eminent as Ganto had screamed when he died, which to Hakuin meant that he was at least experiencing hell in that moment, it just shot him down. Every reason he had to become a monk, all of a sudden, or I should say every overt reason, because really there was something behind his becoming a monk. Otherwise, he wouldn't have become the eminent teacher that he did. But his overt reason for becoming a monk suddenly was shot out of the water. And he was quite depressed about this. And at a certain point, he even quit Zen training for a while. But eventually he went back to Zen training and had more Kenshos. And again, it's important not to assume that we're home free with one kensho. Kensho literally means seeing into, meaning seeing into the true nature of reality. But there are various depths of seeing. And it depends on how deeply we see, how, first of all, how effective it is to have that kensho and how transformative it will be in our life. But also it is just a beginning. And it's so important to keep on going and to keep reaching deeper. Having a kensho, now you can see something that's important in terms of a truer way of experiencing reality. But Hakuin had 19 major kensho experiences before the final one. Well, the final one was the 19th one, that he finally found peace, ongoing peace. The earlier ones, of course, gave him some insight. The first one he was absolutely positive that he'd had the most amazing enlightenment that anybody had ever had in 300 years. And it took Dokyo Eitan to make him realize that maybe that wasn't the case. Maybe he could go deeper. And with Dokyo Eitan, he did. When Hakuin had a certain kensho experience, way into his kensho experiences, he suddenly cried out, Ganto is alive and well right now, right here. And this is what this person has been writing about, not in terms of what somebody else thinks, but in terms of what she herself has realized. Treating people in certain ways is locking them into being that way in more ways than one. Because when we don't react to somebody in a condemning manner, in a judgmental manner, when we open to the experience of the person just as they are, independent of behavior, independent of opinions, something very amazing can happen. And I give you an example of that. You've heard it before. At Shofukuji Monastery in Kobe, Japan, when Harada Mitra-roshi was one of the four-head monks at the temple, which means he was relatively senior. He'd already had kensho, a deep kensho, actually. I don't know anything more about how many deeper insights he's had, but I don't doubt that he hasn't continued on and had deeper insights. When you see him sit, it's quite phenomenal. There's nobody sitting there because he's let go in that moment of any idea of being somebody. So here is Dosan, as he was called, leading a group of other monks and lay people, actually, because the person that told me this was present, and he actually was a lay person, an American. And so they were out there doing some kind of work with shovels and so on. He didn't specify what kind of work they were doing. But as they were working outside the main gate, but still on the temple property, a group of homeless people came up who were living on the property. And the leader of the homeless folks, as Daikatsu told me, was no stranger to violence, it appeared. He was a big, burly guy and furious as he was approaching the Roshi, who was not yet a Roshi. He was still a monk. And he's still a monk, by the way, despite the fact that he bears the title Roshi. And this is one of the highest accolades one could give him. So this man who was furious approached the Roshi, and he was literally in his face, red-faced, bellowing at Dosan about this issue of the water. They thought the temple was cheating them out of water. And what did Dosan do? It was so potentially violent that Daikatsu told me he was holding on a shovel, and he kept hold of that shovel in case he needed to whack the guy if he took a punch at Dosan. Dosan got very deeply quiet inside. He was fully present with the man. He was honoring his presence, honoring his concerns, listening to him. He was not responding other than with an open demeanor. He wasn't giving the impression of being on the defensive. He was simply giving the impression of being really present and really hearing this guy. And gradually, as Dosan got quieter and quieter and quieter, and I say quieter, I mean internally quiet, energetically quiet, the man also began to get quiet. And in the end, whatever was said, I don't know if Daikatsu knew Japanese at that point, but I don't know what was said or how it ended up, other than the fact that the man and his followers went away seemingly satisfied. Dosan didn't have to say a word. All he had to do was honestly listen to this man. People in Japan are homeless largely because they don't fit into the very strict and very demanding Japanese culture. And so undoubtedly, this man felt that he was a failure and had to defend some shred of self-image by standing up for what he felt his friends were being robbed of. There's a story that Mitra-roshi used to tell about being on a train in Japan, and at a particular stop, the doors open, and this Japanese man, disheveled and irate, stepped in and started looking for somebody to beat up, actually. And I don't remember exactly what he was doing initially, but an elderly couple called out to him and said, "Come on here, come sit with us and tell us about it." And the man actually did go over and sit with this elderly couple. And as Mitra-roshi got off the train at his stop, he saw that this man who had come into the train in fury was had his head in the lap of the elderly gentleman and was sobbing. And the man was the elderly gentleman was saying, "Now, it's okay, you're okay." Just to show some human kindness had defused that situation. Now, if we're talking about what was going on in the Capitol the other day, that's a very different kind of situation. But nonetheless, to judge these people harshly in terms of condemning their personalities, for example, is to, in essence, kill them. They were there because something was going on in their minds that they felt like they needed to save. And most likely, these people had some level of growing up experiences that were not very kind, and got a self-image that caused them to feel the need to react like that. In the midst of that violence, it's not necessarily the time to do anything about it. But in the case of, for example, the homeless man at Shofukuji, or the belligerent man coming into the train in Japan. And we had a situation like that at Hidden Valley Zen Center as well. It was during a sesshin, and two of our members were outside. They were refinishing the double doors of the Zendo building. And a neighbor came up, and he was someone who was most likely on drugs. He was naked to the waist and exceedingly belligerent. He was quite angrily accusing them of something that actually the rest of us were also concerned about, interestingly enough. We had been approached by a landscaper because we had quite a bit of property at Hidden Valley Zen Center, and there wasn't much on it. We had torn down the ramshackle buildings that had been on it. It had originally been a plant nursery. And, and this man had come and asked if he could use it to place shredded trees. He did a lot of heavy landscaping, apparently, and also to temporarily store some logs. So we signed a contract with him. One of our members there is now retired from being the head of a park in the Coronado Park System in Coronado, California, which is off on an island off of San Diego. And Doshin came up with a contract. I mean, he was used to contracting with suppliers and so on as a park person. And they were allowed to put clean, shredded plant material, no waste and no palm fronds. Apparently palm fronds don't deteriorate very fast. And what was happening was this man had so much business that suddenly, and there was a depth limit too. I can't remember what it was, 18 inches or something. And suddenly the whole place was full of shredded stuff, including some trash, including palm fronds. And it was stinking. And the man had also put the same kind of debris up behind the greenhouse area that he was renting. And this young man, who claimed to be a member of the family that originally owned all the property around there, which was interesting, but anyway, and it was accusing us of making the neighborhood a mess. And he stood there and he was screaming, literally. And I heard him yelling at the guys, and so I went out and just listened, because that's what you have to do first. You have to find out what the person is upset about, if they're upset. And then it was hard to find a moment where he wasn't streaming his concerns in a loud voice. But I did find a moment. I said, we're with you. We have the same concerns. This is not what was arranged with this man. And we gradually chatted, not very long, because that statement that we were on his side kind of took him aback, and he went away. There are so many times in human interactions where we shoot from the hip. We react out of our own history and our own conditioning without ever realizing what's really going on. What's behind the scenes? What is this person really, really feeling? How'd they grow up? How'd they get to be the way they are with such rabid views, if you want to call it that? Understanding can go a long way. And it's our duty as people of practice to be open to the humanity of all beings. It is part of our practice to recognize where we're caught in assuming things about other people and reacting to our own assumptions about them. But this person is actually talking about a much deeper understanding, which is quite true. Let me read this again. I've been thinking over the past few days about the Capitol insurrection like many people, and also distressed about how many people on Facebook are extreme on either side. It was clearly a terrible thing to do, but there have been so many people writing off other people as evil or in a cult or whatever. And I feel like if you think like that, you're really not going to bridge any gaps. This is one thing I learned from Buddhism and living in Oklahoma, is how to think about people as people and not primarily about their political or social views, which I would most likely disagree with. Anyway, I was doing yoga this afternoon and musing over this in the back of my brain, and all of a sudden I thought, but nothing is outside. But nothing is outside. Not other people, not other beings. Nothing is outside God. And she is absolutely right on with that. Thich Nhat Hanh speaks of it as well. I don't have the poem memorized, but he did write a poem after the war, saying something to the fact that, I'm the child who's been napalmed, and I'm also the pilot that dropped the napalm. I'm the Viet Cong who shot the villager. I'm the villager who's been shot. It's a deep understanding. Hakuin said, there's nothing outside us. There's nothing we lack. Nirvana is openly shown to our eyes. This earth where we stand is the pure lotus land, and this very body, the body of Buddha. And it's not that this body is the body of Buddha and that body is not. She is quite right on when she says, nothing is outside God. Nothing is outside Buddha nature. This is what we are. And yet, we aren't anything. Form is emptiness, and emptiness is form. And of course, the scroll behind me is written, out of not one thing arise the 10,000 things. And we are that not one thing, and we are the 10,000 things. The more deeply we can realize this, the more completely we are free. And in freeing ourselves, we are freeing all beings. This is very deep understanding. As we continue to do our practice, we can reach this understanding and become increasingly free the more deeply we go into it. And again, as I said, as we become free, all beings become free because there is nothing outside. I leave you with this to ponder. It's very important. Thank you for listening. We'll stop now and recite the 4 vows.